Montana Territory, 1878. The spring sun beat down on the dusty main street of Broken Creek as Vincent Zachariah rode into town with a jaw set as hard as the mountains shadowing the valley. At 25, he had already survived more heartbreak than most men twice his age, and he wore his solitude like armor. His dark hair showed beneath a weathered hat, his clean-shaven face marked by a strong jawline and eyes the color of storm clouds. Women turned to watch him pass, their interest plain, but Vincent kept his gaze forward. He had learned the truth about beauty years ago, learned it the hard way when Elizabeth Montgomery had stood at the altar beside him, looked into his eyes, and said she could not marry a poor ranch hand with nothing but dreams and calluses to offer. That had been 3 years past. 3 years of building a small ranch alone on the edge of the territory, of sleeping under stars that offered no warmth, of convincing himself that the frontier demanded strength, not sentiment. Love was a luxury for men with means. A cowboy with nothing but a struggling homestead and a dozen head of cattle had no business reaching for anything beyond survival. Better to remain alone than to risk that kind of humiliation again. He tied his horse outside the general store, his saddlebags empty and his coin purse light. The winter had been harsh, taking 5 of his cattle and nearly claiming him as well when fever had struck in February. He had survived barely, thrashing alone in his small cabin with no one to bring him water or cool his burning skin. The experience had only confirmed what he already knew. A man alone was vulnerable, but a man who opened his heart was even more so. The bell above the door chimed as Vincent stepped inside. The store was cramped and shadowy, shelves stocked with supplies that represented civilization's tenuous hold on this wild land. Behind the counter stood a woman he did not recognize, her attention focused on a ledger before her. "Be with you in a moment," she said, her voice soft but clear. Vincent removed his hat, a habit his mother had drilled into him before cholera had taken her on the wagon trail west. He studied the woman as she finished writing. She was young, perhaps 22 or 23, with hair the color of wheat fields in late summer pulled back in a simple bun. Her dress was plain brown calico, mended carefully at the sleeves, and her face bore a long scar that ran from her left temple down across her cheek, the kind of mark that made children stare and marriageable women despair. When she looked up, Vincent saw eyes of a startling green, bright with intelligence and something else he could not immediately name. She smiled, and the expression transformed her scarred face into something unexpectedly warm. "Welcome to Nash General Store. What can I help you find today?" "I need supplies," Vincent said, stepping to the counter. "Flour, coffee, salt if the price is reasonable. Some nails and perhaps fabric for a new shirt if there is anything left after the necessities." The woman nodded, already moving to gather items. "You are Vincent Zachariah from the homestead north of town. My uncle mentioned you when you registered your brand last month." "Your uncle?" "Thomas Nash. He owns this store, though his rheumatism keeps him upstairs most days now." She set a sack of flour on the counter with easy strength. "I am Rebecca Nash. I arrived from Ohio 6 weeks ago to help him manage the business." Rebecca Nash. Vincent studied her more carefully as she worked. Despite the scar that society would deem disfiguring, she moved with quiet confidence. Her hands were capable as she measured out coffee beans, and she kept the store organized better than old Thomas had ever managed. "That is a lot of supplies for one man," Rebecca observed as she tallied his purchases. "Are you expecting a hard season?" "Every season is hard in Montana," Vincent replied, more curtly than he intended. He had no patience for small talk, especially not with a woman whose kindness might mask pity. He had seen enough pitying looks to last a lifetime. Rebecca did not flinch at his tone. Instead, she met his eyes directly. $2.40. I threw in extra nails. The box was damaged, so I cannot sell them at full price anyway." It was a kindness disguised as practicality. Vincent felt something uncomfortable twist in his chest, an emotion he had thought long buried. He paid, careful not to let their hands touch as he counted out coins. "Thank you, Miss Nash." "Rebecca, please." "And you are welcome to return any time. I keep better hours than my uncle did, and I do not water down the whiskey." Despite himself, Vincent felt his mouth quirk upward. It was not quite a smile, but it was closer than he had come in months. He gathered his supplies and left quickly, unsettled by the interaction in ways he could not articulate. Over the following weeks, Vincent found reasons to return to the store more often than strictly necessary. He told himself it was simple convenience, that Nash General Store had better prices than the trading post on the south end of town. He did not examine too closely why he always seemed to visit during the afternoon when Rebecca was most likely to be alone at the counter. She never treated him with the flirtation other women had attempted. Instead, she discussed the weather patterns, asked intelligent questions about raising cattle, and occasionally recommended books from the small lending library her uncle maintained in the corner. Vincent found himself lingering longer than he should, drawn by her easy conversation and complete lack of pretense. "You should read this," Rebecca said one afternoon in early June, sliding a worn volume across the counter. "It is about cattle ranching in Texas. Some of the techniques might translate to Montana conditions." Vincent took the book, genuinely interested. "You have read this?" "I read everything that comes through the store, not much else to do in the evenings." She paused, her scarred face thoughtful. "Though I am starting a small garden behind the building. Uncle Thomas says I am wasting my time, that nothing grows properly this far north, but I think he is wrong." "What are you planting?" "Vegetables mostly. Potatoes, carrots, some herbs. There is a spring that runs behind the property, so water is not an issue." She hesitated, then added, "You could see it if you like." "I am proud of what I have managed so far." Every instinct screamed at Vincent to refuse, to maintain the careful distance he had cultivated. But Rebecca's invitation held no coyness, no calculated feminine strategy. It was simply an offer to share something she cared about with someone who might appreciate the work involved. "All right," he heard himself say. The garden was small but impressively organized. Rebecca had cleared rocks from the soil and built raised beds using scrap lumber. Young plants showed green against the dark earth, arranged in neat rows. A makeshift scarecrow stood guard at the center, its stuffed shirt flapping in the mountain breeze. "This is good work," Vincent said, genuinely impressed. "You have a talent for this." Rebecca flushed with pleasure, the color making her scar stand out more prominently. Vincent found he barely noticed the mark anymore. Instead, he saw the light in her eyes, the dirt under her fingernails, the satisfaction of someone who had built something with their own hands. "My mother taught me back in Ohio," Rebecca said softly. "Before the accident." Vincent waited, sensing there was more to the story if she chose to share it. "A fire," Rebecca continued, touching her scarred cheek unconsciously. "I was 16, our house caught while we were sleeping. I got my younger brothers out, but a burning beam fell across my face. Mother died in the flames." Her voice remained steady, but Vincent saw the old pain in her eyes. "After that, the young men who had courted me found other interests. My father remarried within a year. His new wife made it clear I was not welcome, so when Uncle Thomas wrote asking for help, I came west." "I am sorry," Vincent said, the words inadequate but sincere. "Do not be." "I am not," Rebecca smiled, and again Vincent was struck by how the expression illuminated her face. "Out here, people care more about what you can do than how you look. I like running the store. I like building my garden. I like the freedom to be useful rather than ornamental." Her words struck something deep inside Vincent. She had found peace in capability, in purpose, in rejecting the notion that a woman's value lay solely in beauty and marriageability. He envied that peace even as he recognized his own stubborn clinging to isolation. "Would you like to stay for supper?" Rebecca asked suddenly. "Nothing fancy, just stew and bread. But I made too much, and it seems a waste to let it go uneaten." Vincent knew he should refuse. Accepting would mean crossing a line, would mean acknowledging that these visits had become more than simple commerce. But the thought of returning to his empty cabin, of eating alone as he had for 3 years, suddenly felt unbearable. "I would like that," he said. They ate at a small table behind the store, talking easily as evening shadows lengthened across the mountains. Rebecca spoke of Ohio, of her mother's herb garden and her father's disappointment in having a scarred daughter. Vincent found himself talking about his own parents, about the wagon trail west that had claimed his mother, about his father's subsequent descent into drink and early death. "Elizabeth Montgomery told me I had nothing to offer," Vincent said, surprising himself with the admission. He had never spoken of his failed wedding to anyone. She said she could not live the kind of hardscrabble life I was offering. She married a banker from Helena 3 months later. Rebecca was quiet for a moment, then said, "She sounds like a fool." Vincent looked up sharply. "You have built a homestead essentially alone," Rebecca continued. "You have survived Montana winters, fever, and financial hardship. You work hard enough to keep calluses on your hands but still find time to read. And you are kind even when you try not to be." She met his eyes steadily. "Elizabeth Montgomery did not reject you because you had nothing to offer. She rejected you because she could not see what was right in front of her." Something cracked inside Vincent's chest, a fissure in the armor he had worn for 3 years. He wanted to believe Rebecca, wanted to trust the conviction in her voice, but old wounds ran deep. "You are generous in your assessment," he said carefully. "I am honest in my assessment." Rebecca stood, clearing dishes with brisk efficiency. "You can accept that or not, but it does not change the truth." Vincent helped her wash up, their hands occasionally brushing in the soapy water. Each contact felt charged with possibility, with the terrifying promise of connection he had sworn to avoid. When he finally left, riding back to his homestead under a sky blazing with stars, he felt more confused than he had in years. The confusion only deepened over the following weeks. Vincent found himself riding into Broken Creek 3 times a week, always with some excuse about supplies or library books. Rebecca greeted him with the same warm smile, never pushing but always welcoming. They fell into an easy pattern. Vincent would help her in the garden after his purchases, staying for supper more often than not, talking until the mountain air turned cool and the first stars appeared. One evening in late July, as they worked together weeding between the potato rows, Rebecca said, "There is a dance next Saturday at the church hall. The whole town will be there." Vincent felt his stomach tighten. "I do not dance." "Neither do I usually. People stare at the scarred woman, wonder who was foolish enough to invite her." Rebecca pulled a stubborn weed free, shaking soil from its roots. "But I thought perhaps we could go together. As friends, if nothing else, it would be nice to attend without people's pity." Vincent understood what she was offering, not romance necessarily, but solidarity. Two people who had been rejected, who bore visible and invisible scars, facing down small-town judgment together. It was the kind of vulnerability he had spent years avoiding. "I will think about it," he said, which they both knew meant no. Rebecca nodded, unsurprised and seemingly unperturbed. But Vincent saw the flicker of disappointment in her eyes before she hid it behind renewed focus on her weeding. That night, alone in his cabin, Vincent could not sleep. He stared at the rough-hewn ceiling beams and forced himself to confront an uncomfortable truth. He was falling in love with Rebecca Nash. It had happened quietly, like spring arriving in Montana, barely noticeable until suddenly the whole world was transformed. Her intelligence attracted him, yes, and her practical competence, her humor and her honesty. But more than that, he loved how she made him feel like a better version of himself, like the capable man he had been trying so hard to become. But love meant vulnerability. Love meant risking the kind of public humiliation he had experienced with Elizabeth. And while Rebecca had shown no signs of rejecting him, Vincent knew his fear had little to do with logic. It was bone-deep instinctive, a survival mechanism that had kept him safe for 3 years. By morning, he had convinced himself that maintaining distance was the wisest course. He would reduce his visits to the store, would rebuild the walls that Rebecca had so effortlessly breached. It was the only way to protect himself. He managed to stay away for 4 days. 4 days of working himself to exhaustion on the ranch, of tending cattle and mending fences until his hands bled. But on the 5th day, his resolve crumbled. He rode into Broken Creek with no excuse, no carefully planned reason for visiting. Rebecca looked up when he entered the store, her face lighting with genuine pleasure. "Vincent, I was beginning to worry you had fallen into a ravine." "Just busy with the ranch," he lied. "Well, I am glad you are here. I need help with something if you have time." She led him out back to the garden, where a large wooden crate sat beside the raised beds, supplies for building a root cellar. "I ordered them weeks ago, but they only arrived today, and they are too heavy for me to manage alone." They worked together through the afternoon, digging into the hillside behind the store, framing out the cellar walls with lumber. It was hard, satisfying labor, and Vincent felt his careful resolutions weakening with each shared task. Rebecca's companionship was like water to a man dying of thirst, and he could no more walk away than he could stop breathing. "You are good at this," Rebecca said as they braced the final wall. "Building things, I mean, you should consider hiring yourself out as a carpenter in the off-season." "I prefer working with cattle," Vincent replied, though he felt pleased at her compliment. "You are good with animals too, you are good with lots of things." Rebecca wiped sweat from her forehead, leaving a smudge of dirt across her scar. "Why are you so determined not to see it?" The question was so direct it knocked the breath from Vincent's lungs. He set down his hammer carefully, buying time to formulate an answer. "Because seeing it, believing it, only makes the fall harder when it comes," he finally said. Rebecca studied him for a long moment, then she crossed the small space between them and took his hand. Her fingers were work-roughened, warm and real. "What if there is no fall?" she asked softly. "What if believing in yourself, in your own worth, is exactly what keeps you standing?" Vincent looked down at their joined hands, at the physical evidence of connection he had denied himself for so long. His heart hammered against his ribs, fear and longing warring in his chest. "I do not know how to do that," he admitted. "Then maybe we learn together." Before Vincent could respond, a commotion from the street shattered the moment. Raised voices, the pounding of hooves, the unmistakable sound of trouble rolling into Broken Creek like a summer storm. They rushed around to the front of the store. 3 men on horseback had cornered a young woman in the street, their intentions clear from their leering expressions and crude comments. Vincent recognized the girl as Sarah Dalton, daughter of a farmer who lived east of town. "Please just let me go home," Sarah was saying, her voice shaking. "Oh, we just want to be friendly," one of the men said. He was large and mean-looking, with a week's growth of beard and the cold eyes of someone who enjoyed causing fear. "A pretty thing like you should not walk alone." Vincent felt Rebecca tense beside him. Before he could think better of it, he stepped into the street. "The lady asked to be left alone," he said, his voice carrying across the dusty space. "I suggest you respect that request." The 3 men turned, their expressions shifting from amusement to hostility. The large man spat tobacco juice into the dirt. "This is not your concern, Cowboy." "I am making it my concern." Vincent was aware of his disadvantage. 3 against 1, and all of them armed with guns holstered at their hips. His own pistol hung in his cabin, too far away to do any good. But he had learned to handle himself in the years since coming west, had survived enough close calls to know that sometimes confidence mattered more than weapons. The tension stretched like a drawn wire. Then Rebecca stepped up beside Vincent, holding her uncle's shotgun with calm authority. "Gentlemen, I believe you were just leaving," she said pleasantly. "My aim is excellent and I would hate to redecorate the street." The standoff held for another heartbeat. Then the large man cursed, wheeled his horse around, and rode off with his companions following. Sarah Dalton ran to the safety of the boarding house across the street. Vincent let out a breath he had not realized he was holding. His hands were shaking, adrenaline flooding his system now that the danger had passed. "Thank you," he said to Rebecca. She was trembling too, he noticed, though her voice remained steady. "We should probably go inside. I need to put this away before I drop it." In the store, Rebecca returned the shotgun to its place behind the counter. Then she sat down heavily, the full weight of what they had just done hitting her. "That was foolish," she said. "We could have been killed." "You saved that girl from something terrible." Vincent crouched beside her chair, taking her cold hands in his. "That was brave, not foolish." Rebecca laughed shakily. "I was terrified. Bravery is not the absence of fear, it is doing what is right despite the fear." He squeezed her hands gently. "You taught me that, I think, or you have been trying to." She looked at him then, really looked at him, and Vincent saw his own feelings reflected in her green eyes. The careful friendship they had built suddenly felt too small to contain everything he was feeling. "Rebecca, he started, then stopped, unsure how to put 3 years of loneliness and hope into words. "I know," she said softly. "I feel it too." The bell above the door jangled, shattering the moment. Thomas Nash came shuffling in from the street, his rheumatic hands clutching a newspaper. "Rebecca, girl, I just heard what happened. Are you all right?" The moment was lost, buried under Thomas's concern and the gathering of townspeople who had heard about the confrontation. Vincent slipped away as the store filled with well-wishers, feeling both frustrated and relieved. He needed time to think, to process the tangle of emotions Rebecca had stirred to life. But that night, lying awake in his cabin, Vincent could no longer hide from the truth. He was in love with Rebecca Nash. He loved her courage and her kindness, her intelligence and her strength. He loved how she saw past the walls he had built, how she challenged him to be better without demanding he be different. And terrifyingly, he was beginning to believe that she might love him too. The question was what he would do about it. Saturday arrived with Vincent no closer to an answer. He spent the morning working on his ranch, trying to exhaust himself into clarity. But as afternoon faded toward evening, he found himself bathing in the creek, putting on his cleanest shirt and riding toward Broken Creek. The church hall blazed with light and music. Half the town seemed to be crowded inside, dancing to the enthusiastic if not entirely skilled playing of a fiddle and guitar. Vincent tied his horse outside and stood in the shadows, watching through the window. He saw Rebecca almost immediately. She stood against the wall in a dress of blue cotton that brought out the color of her eyes, watching the dancers with an expression of studied neutrality. No one approached her. Men danced with other women, laughing and spinning through the simple steps, but Rebecca remained alone. Vincent saw the way she held herself, proud despite the isolation. He saw the way her fingers tapped unconsciously to the music, betraying her desire to join in. And he saw the moment when her gaze drifted to the door, as if hoping someone might come. The armor around his heart finally shattered. What was he doing, hiding in the shadows, protecting himself from potential pain while Rebecca stood alone inside? She had been brave enough to move west, to build a new life after tragedy and rejection. She had been brave enough to reach out to him, to offer friendship and then something deeper without any guarantee he would reciprocate. The least he could do was be brave enough to walk through that door. Vincent entered the hall. Conversation did not stop, but he felt eyes turned toward him, felt the weight of small-town attention. He ignored it all and walked straight to Rebecca. "I believe you mentioned wanting to dance," he said. Rebecca's face transformed, surprise giving way to pure joy. "I did. Though I should warn you, I am terrible at it." "Then we will be terrible together." He offered his hand, she took it, and they moved onto the floor as the fiddler struck up a new tune. Vincent had been honest when he said he did not dance. He knew the basic steps from barn dances in his youth, but he was no one's idea of graceful. Rebecca was equally unpracticed, concentrating fiercely on not stepping on his feet. They moved together awkwardly, out of rhythm with the music and each other. It was perfect. "People are staring," Rebecca murmured. "Let them." Vincent pulled her slightly closer, finding his footing in the simple two-step. "I do not care what they think." "When did that happen?" "About 5 minutes ago." He met her eyes, letting her see everything he had been hiding. "You were right, about me, about what I had to offer." "About all of it." Rebecca stumbled and he caught her, and suddenly they were standing still in the middle of the dancing crowd. Her eyes shone with unshed tears. "Vincent." "I love you," he said, the words coming easily now that he had stopped fighting them. "I think I have loved you since the day you gave me those damaged nails and pretended it was just good business. I love your strength and your stubbornness and the way you see the best in people even when they cannot see it themselves. And I am sorry it took me so long to be brave enough to say it." "You are saying it now," Rebecca whispered. "That is what matters." "I do not have much to offer," Vincent continued, needing to be completely honest. "My ranch is small, my prospects uncertain, but I promise to work hard to build something better too." Rebecca stopped him with a finger against his lips. "I do not care about prospects or properties, I care about you. Just you exactly as you are." They were definitely causing a scene now. The music had stopped, and the entire town was watching the scarred shopkeeper and the solitary cowboy declare their love in the middle of the dance floor. Vincent supposed he should feel embarrassed. Instead, he felt free. "I love you too," Rebecca said clearly, her voice carrying in the sudden quiet. "I have for weeks. I was just waiting for you to catch up." Vincent laughed, pure and joyful. Then he kissed her right there in front of God and the entire town of Broken Creek. It was clumsy and perfect, tasting of hope and new beginnings. The hall erupted in applause and good-natured cheering. Someone started the music again and couples resumed dancing, but Vincent and Rebecca stayed where they were, holding each other, smiling like fools. "We are going to be the talk of the town for months," Rebecca said. "I can live with that," Vincent touched her scarred cheek gently, "as long as I am living with you." "Is that a proposal, Vincent Zachariah? Would you say yes if it were? Try me and find out." Vincent had never been good with pretty words or romantic gestures. So he simply took both of her hands in his, grounding himself in the physical reality of her presence, and spoke from the heart. "Rebecca Nash, you are the bravest, kindest, most remarkable woman I have ever known. You make me want to be better than I am. You make me believe that maybe I already am. I do not know what the future holds, but I know I want to face it with you. Will you marry me?" Rebecca was crying now, tears tracking down her scarred cheek and smiling so wide it looked like it hurt. "Yes. Yes, absolutely yes." They kissed again as the town cheered around them, and Vincent felt the last of his old wounds begin to heal. He had spent 3 years believing that loneliness was safety, that isolation was strength. Rebecca had shown him the truth, that real strength came from vulnerability, real safety from connection, and real love from choosing someone every day and trusting them to choose you back. The weeks that followed were a blur of joy and planning. Vincent asked Thomas Nash for Rebecca's hand, a formality given that she had already accepted, but one that felt important nonetheless. Thomas gave his blessing enthusiastically, noting that his niece deserved happiness and that Vincent seemed like a man who could provide it. They decided to marry in September, after the harvest. It would give Vincent time to expand his cabin into something more suitable for 2 people, and Rebecca time to arrange the store so her uncle could manage it with hired help. The cabin renovation became a community project. Men from town who had watched Vincent struggle alone for 3 years suddenly appeared with lumber and tools, working alongside him to add a proper bedroom, enlarge the main room, and build Rebecca the kitchen she had described in careful detail. The women of Broken Creek, who had previously viewed the scarred shopkeeper with a mix of pity and dismissal, began including her in their activities, bringing fabric for a wedding dress and sharing recipes and advice. "I think they feel guilty," Rebecca said one evening as she and Vincent worked on painting the new bedroom, "for how they treated me before. Does it bother you, their sudden change?" Rebecca considered, her brush moving in steady strokes across the wood. "A little, but mostly I am just glad people can change their minds, can look past first impressions." She glanced at him with a teasing smile. "After all, you did." Vincent caught her around the waist, paint brush and all, pulling her close. "I never thought you were anything but beautiful." "Liar, the first time you saw me, you could barely look at my face." "That is because you were beautiful and kind and completely unnerving," Vincent corrected. "I was trying to protect myself from wanting you." "How did that work out?" "Terribly, thank God." They dissolved into laughter and kissing, getting more paint on each other than on the walls. These moments of easy affection still amazed Vincent. He had thought himself beyond such happiness, had resigned himself to a life measured in survival rather than joy. Now here he was, renovating his cabin for a wife he loved beyond reason, covered in paint and grinning like a boy. But their happiness was not without shadows. The 3 men who had harassed Sarah Dalton had not been seen in Broken Creek since that day, but rumors suggested they were part of a larger gang operating throughout the territory. The local sheriff, an aging man named Garrett, warned townspeople to remain vigilant. "They are called the Sutton Gang," Sheriff Garrett explained at a town meeting in late August, led by Cole Sutton and his brothers. "They have been running cattle, robbing stages, and causing trouble from here to the Wyoming border. The territorial marshal is hunting them, but they are slippery as greased snakes." Vincent felt Rebecca tense beside him. After the meeting, as they walked back to the store, she said, "The man who bothered Sarah, the large one, that was Cole Sutton." "Probably. Why?" "I saw him this morning, across the street, watching the store." Cold fear washed through Vincent. "Why did you not say something?" "Because I was not sure until Sheriff Garrett described him, and because I did not want to alarm anyone unnecessarily." Rebecca's voice was steady, but Vincent heard the thread of worry beneath. "But if it was him, if he is still around town?" Then we need to be careful, Vincent took her hand. I will talk to the sheriff tomorrow, let him know what you saw. In the meantime, keep the shotgun close. Rebecca nodded, but Vincent could see the situation had shaken her more than she wanted to admit. He walked her home and checked every corner of the store before leaving, promising to return first thing in the morning. He returned to find the store's front window shattered, glass littering the floor like scattered diamonds. Rebecca stood in the center of the destruction, white-faced but unhurt, while Sheriff Garrett examined a rock that had been thrown through the window. A piece of paper was wrapped around the rock, secured with twine. Vincent took the stairs 3 at a time, grabbing Rebecca and pulling her close. Are you all right? Did they hurt you? I am fine. I was upstairs with Uncle Thomas when we heard the crash. She pulled back to meet his eyes. Vincent, the note, you need to read it. Sheriff Garrett handed over the crumpled paper. The message was crude, written in an unsteady hand. Mind your business or pay the price. The SCARRED woman won't be so lucky next time. Rage, white-hot and blinding, flooded through Vincent. His hands shook as he crushed the note. I am going after them, he said. No, you are not, Sheriff Garrett's voice was firm. That is exactly what they want, to draw you out where they can ambush you. These men are killers, son, they do not fight fair. Then what are we supposed to do? Wait for them to make good on their threats. We do this smart. I will wire the territorial marshal, get deputies in here. Until then, you stay together and stay public. They are bullies, but they are not stupid. They will not try anything with witnesses around. It was sound advice, but it gnawed at Vincent. He helped Rebecca clean up the glass and board over the broken window, hyper-aware of every sound, every shadow. Rebecca worked quietly beside him, her earlier fear hardening into determination. I am not letting them drive me away, she said as they swept up the last shards. I built a life here, I found you here. I will not run. No one is asking you to run, Vincent said, but maybe you should stay at my ranch for a few days until this settles. And abandon Uncle Thomas. He cannot manage the store alone and we cannot afford to close. Rebecca set aside her broom. I appreciate the concern, but I am staying. They argued about it for another hour, with Vincent growing increasingly frustrated at Rebecca's stubbornness and Rebecca refusing to budge. Finally, they reached a compromise. Rebecca would stay at the store, but Vincent would sleep downstairs each night and they would not go anywhere alone. The next week passed in tense vigilance. Sheriff Garrett brought in 2 deputies from the next county and they patrolled the town in shifts. Vincent barely left Rebecca's side except to tend his cattle, and even then he hurried through his chores, anxious to return. The Sutton gang made no further moves. It was almost worse than an outright attack, the waiting and wondering eating at Vincent's nerves. He found himself jumping at shadows, hand hovering near the pistol he now wore constantly. We cannot live like this, Rebecca said one evening as they sat in the store after closing, always looking over our shoulders, afraid of what might happen. I know, but I do not know how to fix it. Maybe it will fix itself. Maybe they have moved on to easier targets. Vincent wanted to believe that, but something in his gut told him this was not over. He was proven right 3 days later. Vincent had ridden out to his ranch to check on his herd. It was a routine trip, one he had made dozens of times that week. But when he crested the ridge overlooking his homestead, his blood turned to ice. His cabin was burning. Flames engulfed the new bedroom he had built, licking at the roof and sending thick black smoke into the clear September sky. Vincent spurred his horse forward, already knowing he was too late to save the structure but needing to try anyway. He managed to salvage some tools from the barn before the fire spread, but the cabin was a total loss. He stood in the yard, watching months of work collapse into ash, feeling numb and hollow. They had destroyed his home, his future with Rebecca, everything he had been building toward a life beyond mere survival. A paper was nailed to the barn door. This time the message was even more direct. Leave the SCARRED woman or lose everything. Vincent rode back to town in a daze, the note clenched in his fist. Part of him understood that this was a tactic, that the Sutton gang was trying to isolate Rebecca by driving him away. But a darker part, the part that still carried the wounds of his humiliation with Elizabeth, whispered that maybe it would be better for everyone if he did leave. If he stepped aside, maybe the gang would lose interest in Rebecca. Maybe she would be safe. He found her at the store helping a customer. When she saw his face, she immediately sent the woman away and locked the door. What happened? Vincent showed her the note, watched her face go pale as she read it. Your cabin. Gone, they burned it to the ground. Rebecca made a small, wounded sound, then she wrapped her arms around him, holding tight. Vincent stood stiff in her embrace, fighting the urge to pull away, to rebuild the walls that loving her had dismantled. We will rebuild, Rebecca said fiercely. Together, we will make it better than before. This is my fault, Vincent said. If I had not confronted them that day, if I had just stayed out of it. Then Sarah Dalton might have been raped or killed, and we would be having a different, terrible conversation. Rebecca pulled back to look at him. You did the right thing, Vincent, we both did. And now you are paying the price. They want me to leave you, maybe I should. The words hung between them like poison. Vincent saw the impact register on Rebecca's face, saw hurt flash through her eyes before she locked it down. Is that what you want? She asked quietly. No, God no, but I cannot let them hurt you because of me. That is not your choice to make. Rebecca's voice was steady but edged with steel. I am not some damsel who needs protecting from her own decisions. I knew loving you might be complicated. I chose it anyway. Rebecca. No, listen to me. She gripped his arms, forcing him to meet her eyes. 3 years ago, you let Elizabeth Montgomery's rejection define you. You decided that you were not worth loving, that survival alone was enough, and it almost worked until I came along and disrupted everything. Vincent tried to speak, but Rebecca continued, relentless. I am not Elizabeth. I am not going to leave because things got hard, but I need to know that you are not going to leave either. I need to know that you believe in us enough to fight for it. It was the confrontation Vincent had been avoiding, the fundamental question he had been dancing around since the day Rebecca first smiled at him across the store counter. Did he believe in them? Could he trust that love was worth the risk, worth the pain it might bring? He thought about the past months, the easy companionship that had grown between them. The way Rebecca challenged him to be better while accepting him exactly as he was. The feeling of coming home he experienced every time he saw her, the life they had been building together, piece by careful piece. And he thought about the alternative. Going back to his lonely existence, to survival without joy, to the half-life he had been living before she crashed into his world with her scarred face and golden heart. I believe, he said, the words rough but certain. I believe in us. And I am not going anywhere. Rebecca sagged with relief, tears spilling down her cheeks. Vincent pulled her close, holding on like she was the only solid thing in a shifting world. Then we face this together, she said against his chest. Whatever comes, we face it together. They went to Sheriff Garrett with the burned note. The sheriff's face grew grim as he read it. This changes things, he said. They are not just making threats anymore. This is targeted harassment, maybe attempted murder depending on whether you were supposed to be in that cabin. He looked at Vincent seriously. I know you do not want to hear this, but you two need to consider leaving town until the marshal can round up the gang. No, Rebecca and Vincent said simultaneously. Sheriff Garrett sighed. I figured you would say that. All right then, we do this the hard way. I will increase patrols, keep men watching the store and your property, Vincent, but you need to be smart. Stay armed, stay together, and for God's sake, do not give them any opportunities. They agreed, though Vincent could see the frustration on the sheriff's weathered face. Garrett was a good man doing his best with limited resources. The territorial marshal was stretched thin across hundreds of miles. Help might come, but not quickly enough. That night, Vincent stayed at the store as had become his custom, but sleep eluded him. He kept seeing his cabin engulfed in flames, kept imagining worse scenarios where Rebecca was caught in the fire instead of lumber and plaster. Around midnight, he gave up on rest and went downstairs. Rebecca was there, sitting by the window with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. I could not sleep either, she said. Vincent sat beside her and they watched the empty street together. The moon was nearly full, painting everything in shades of silver and shadow. Tell me about the future, Rebecca said softly. The one we are building together. Vincent understood what she was doing, anchoring them both to hope instead of fear. He took her hand. We rebuild the cabin, bigger this time. A real ranch house with a proper kitchen and a bedroom large enough for, he paused, shy suddenly. For children, Rebecca finished, maybe if you want them. I want them. I want a whole noisy house full of them, running through our garden and learning to ride horses and driving us both crazy. She leaned her head on his shoulder. I want years and years of ordinary days. I want to grow old with you, Vincent. I want to watch the sunset from our porch when we are gray and creaky and so used to each other we finish each other's sentences. That sounds perfect, Vincent said, his throat tight. It does it not? So we have to get there, we have to survive this and build that life. I refuse to let some cowards with matches take it away from us. Her determination fortified Vincent's own resolve. Rebecca was right. They had every reason to fight to hold on to the future they had planned. Letting fear dictate their choices would be letting the Sutton gang win. We should get married, Vincent said suddenly. Rebecca lifted her head. What? I know we plan to wait until September, but I do not want to wait anymore. What if something happens? What if? He stopped, unable to voice his deepest fear. I want you to be my wife, Rebecca, now as soon as possible. Tomorrow if we can. Rebecca studied his face in the moonlight, then she smiled and it was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. Yes, tomorrow or the day after or whenever the preacher can fit us in. Yes. They were married 3 days later in a simple ceremony at the church. Rebecca wore the blue dress from the dance and Vincent borrowed a suit coat from Thomas Nash. The whole town turned out, packing the small church despite the lingering threat of the Sutton gang, or perhaps because of it. The town had watched two outcasts find each other and build something beautiful. They were not about to let outlaws destroy that. Sheriff Garrett stood at the back of the church, shotgun visible, deputies stationed outside. But inside, surrounded by community and candlelight, the danger felt distant. Vincent spoke his vows in a strong, clear voice, promising to love and protect Rebecca for all his days. Rebecca promised the same, her scarred face radiant with joy. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Vincent kissed his bride to thunderous applause. In that moment, standing in the church with Rebecca's hand in his, he felt invincible. Whatever came next, they would face it together. That was all that mattered. The reception was held at the hotel, with donated food and music and more goodwill than Vincent had experienced since coming to Montana. People who had barely spoken to him over the years now clapped him on the back and offered congratulations. Women who had pitied Rebecca now embraced her as a friend. It was imperfect acceptance, tinged with guilt over past slights, but it was real. We should probably go, Rebecca said eventually, as the party showed no signs of winding down. I am exhausted and I want to spend some time alone with my husband. The word sent a thrill through Vincent. Husband, he was someone's husband, Rebecca's husband, it still felt surreal. They had arranged to spend their wedding night at the hotel, a luxury that felt almost decadent. But as they climbed the stairs to their room, Vincent felt unease prickle down his spine. Some instinct honed by years of frontier survival told him something was wrong. He opened the door cautiously, one hand on his pistol. The room appeared empty and undisturbed. But when Rebecca moved to light the lamp, Vincent caught movement from the corner of his eye. Cole Sutton stepped out from behind the wardrobe, gun drawn and pointed directly at Rebecca. "Evening, folks," he said with a smile that never touched his cold eyes. "Congratulations on the wedding, real touching ceremony." Vincent moved slowly, putting himself between Sutton and Rebecca. His own gun was holstered, useless at this distance against a man with his weapon already drawn. "What do you want?" Vincent asked, keeping his voice level. "I want you to understand that I am serious. I told you to leave the woman alone. I gave you chances, warnings, even burned down your house, but you just would not listen." Sutton's gaze flicked to Rebecca. "I do not like being ignored. So you crashed our wedding night." "That seems excessive even for a career criminal," Rebecca said, and Vincent marveled at her composure. Sutton's expression darkened. "You got a mouth on you, Scarface. I remember that from when you pointed that shotgun at me. See, the thing is, me and my brothers, we have a reputation to maintain. We cannot have some scarred shopkeeper and her cowboy boyfriend making us look weak." "So you are going to kill us?" Vincent asked. His mind raced, calculating odds and angles. If he could get Sutton talking, distract him somehow, maybe he could draw his gun or tackle the man before he fired. I am thinking about it. Sutton scratched his jaw with his free hand. Or maybe I just kill her, make you live with that. Let you spend the rest of your life knowing your new wife died because you could not mind your own business. The threat crystallized everything for Vincent. This man was going to hurt Rebecca, and Vincent had seconds, maybe less, to prevent it. All the fear he had carried about vulnerability, about opening himself to loss, suddenly seemed absurd. The worst thing was not risking his heart. The worst thing was losing Rebecca without having fought with everything he had to keep her. You will have to go through me first, Vincent said. That can be arranged. Sutton raised his gun, aiming at Vincent's chest. Rebecca moved like lightning. In one fluid motion, she grabbed the water pitcher from the dresser and hurled it. The heavy ceramic caught Sutton in the side of the head with a solid thunk. He staggered, gun swinging wild, and Vincent lunged. They crashed to the floor in a tangle of limbs. Vincent grappled for the gun, taking an elbow to the ribs that knocked the wind from his lungs. Sutton was larger and meaner, fighting with the dirty tactics of someone who had survived through violence. But Vincent was fighting for Rebecca, for their future, for every quiet morning and shared laugh they had been promised. That made him desperate and dangerous. He got his hand on Sutton's wrist, smashing it against the floor until the gun skittered away. Sutton bucked, throwing him off, and scrambled for the weapon. Vincent grabbed his leg, bringing him down hard. They rolled, knocking over furniture, crashing into walls. Somewhere in the chaos, Vincent heard Rebecca screaming for help, heard boots pounding up the stairs. He took a punch to the jaw that filled his mouth with blood, delivered one to Sutton's gut that doubled the man over. Then Sheriff Garrett was there, shotgun leveled, deputies flooding the room. Sutton, seeing he was outmatched, raised his hands in surrender. The deputies hauled him up roughly, slapping on iron cuffs. Cole Sutton, you are under arrest for assault, destruction of property, and attempted murder, Sheriff Garrett said with evident satisfaction. Your brothers were picked up this morning by the territorial marshal. Your gang is finished. Vincent sat on the floor, breathing hard, his wedding suit torn and bloody. Rebecca dropped to her knees beside him, running her hands over his face, checking for serious injury. Are you all right? She demanded. I am fine. Vincent caught her hands, holding them still. Are you? I am perfect. I am married to the bravest, most stubborn man in Montana, and we just survived our wedding night adventure. She started laughing, a touch hysterical. Most couples worry about nerves on their first night together. We had to fight off outlaws. Vincent started laughing too, pulling her into his arms. Sheriff Garrett shook his head at the pair of them, hauling Sutton toward the door. You two are either the luckiest or unluckiest people I have ever met, the sheriff said. Try to have a quiet rest of your evening, would you? After the lawmen left with their prisoner, Vincent and Rebecca surveyed the wrecked room. The pitcher was shattered, furniture overturned, blood spattered on the floor. It looked like a tornado had torn through. Well, Rebecca said, this is romantic. Vincent looked at his bride, disheveled and gorgeous, and felt love swell so large it seemed his chest could not contain it. I promised you adventure when I married you. You certainly delivered, she touched his split lip gently. We should clean you up. They spent the next hour tending each other's minor injuries and righting the room. It was not the wedding night Vincent had imagined, but somehow it felt right. They had faced danger together and survived. They were a team, partners in every sense. Finally, they collapsed onto the bed, exhausted and relieved. Vincent, Rebecca said into the darkness, yes. I am glad you believed in us. I am glad you chose to fight. I will always fight for you, Vincent promised. For us, that is what love means. Good. Because I will always fight for you too. They fell asleep tangled together, safe and whole and married. The following weeks brought a return to normalcy, or as close to normal as life in Montana could be. The rest of the Sutton gang was rounded up and would face trial in the territorial capital. With the threat eliminated, Broken Creek relaxed into its usual rhythms. Vincent and Rebecca moved into the apartment above the store while they planned the rebuilding of the ranch house. This time they designed something bigger, better, a home meant for a family. The townspeople pitched in again, and by November they had a solid structure weatherproofed against the coming winter. The cabin they built was beautiful. 2 bedrooms, a spacious kitchen, a living area large enough for gatherings. They painted the walls cream and hung curtains Rebecca sewed from fabric salvaged from the store. Vincent built furniture during the long winter evenings while Rebecca filled the rooms with small touches, dried flowers and books and the quilt her mother had made before the fire. Thomas Nash decided to retire, turning the store over to Rebecca and Vincent to run together. It was challenging, balancing ranch work with shopkeeping, but they found a rhythm. Vincent tended cattle in the early mornings and late afternoons, while Rebecca managed the store during business hours. They worked the garden together on Sundays, expanding it each year until they had a thriving operation that supplied vegetables to half the town. Life was not perfect. Money remained tight, especially the first few years. Winters were harsh and they lost cattle to cold and predators. Rebecca miscarried their first child, a loss that devastated them both. But they held each other through the grief and tried again. In the spring of 1881, Rebecca gave birth to a healthy daughter with her mother's green eyes and her father's stubborn chin. They named her Clara after Vincent's mother. 2 years later, a son arrived, Thomas Vincent, named for Rebecca's uncle who had passed peacefully in his sleep the previous winter. Vincent watched his children grow with a sense of wonder he had never expected to feel. Clara was fearless, climbing everything in sight and demanding horseback rides before she could properly walk. Thomas was quieter, content to help his mother in the garden or listen to stories by the fire. On summer evenings, the whole family would sit on the porch Vincent had built, watching the sun set over the mountains that had witnessed their love story. Rebecca would lean against his shoulder, Clara asleep in her lap, Thomas playing with wooden horses at their feet. "Do you ever think about that first day?" Rebecca asked one such evening, "when you came into the store and could barely look at me?" "All the time," Vincent admitted. "I think about how close I came to missing this, to missing you. If I had been just a little more stubborn, a little more committed to my isolation. But you were not, you were brave enough to change." "We both were." And it was true. They had both been rejected by a world that valued surfaces over substance, beauty over character. They had both built walls to protect wounded hearts, but they had found each other anyway, 2 scarred souls who looked past appearances to see the truth beneath. Vincent thought about Elizabeth Montgomery sometimes, wondered if she was happy with her banker in Helena. He bore her no ill will anymore. Her rejection had hurt terribly at the time, but it had also set him on the path to Rebecca. If Elizabeth had not left him, he would never have built his ranch alone, would never have been in that store on that specific day, would never have met the woman who became his whole world. "I love you," he said to Rebecca, as he did every day. "I love you too," she replied, as she always did. "Thank you for fighting for us. Thank you for teaching me how." Years passed, the children grew. Clara became a skilled horsewoman, helping Vincent run the expanding ranch. Thomas developed a gift for numbers and took over managing the store's accounts. More children came, filling the house with noise and laughter. The town of Broken Creek grew as well, transforming from a rough frontier settlement into a proper community. They built a school, then a library, then a proper church to replace the old mission building. Vincent served on the town council, using his experience to help new settlers establish themselves. Rebecca became known throughout the territory for her generosity, always ready with a meal for a struggling family or medicine for the sick. The scar on Rebecca's face faded slightly with time, but it never disappeared. Vincent was glad. That scar was part of her story, part of what had brought them together. It represented survival and strength, the kind of beauty that ran deeper than skin. Sometimes, young couples would come into the store and Rebecca would share her story with those who seemed to need it. The young women who felt too plain, too damaged, too different. The young men who believed they had nothing to offer. Rebecca would tell them about a cowboy who thought himself unworthy of love and a shopkeeper with a scarred face and a golden heart, and how they had found each other in the middle of nowhere and built something extraordinary. On their 25th wedding anniversary, Vincent and Rebecca stood on their porch as the sun set over the Montana mountains. Their children, now grown, had organized a party that brought the whole town to their ranch. There was music and food and celebration, the kind of community gathering that marked milestones in frontier life. But Vincent found himself drawn away from the noise, needing a moment alone with his wife. Rebecca followed him to the garden she had built so many years ago, now expanded into a full acre of vegetables and flowers. 25 years, Rebecca said, threading her fingers through his. Her hair was streaked with silver now, and lines marked the corners of her eyes. She was more beautiful to Vincent than she had been at 23. 25 years, he agreed, and I would do it all again, every hardship, every challenge, every moment of fear. Because it led us here. We built a good life, Rebecca said softly, a better life than I ever dreamed possible when I came west. We built it together, that is what made it good. They stood in comfortable silence, watching fireflies dance through the dusk. Somewhere in the distance, their grandchildren were playing, shrieks of laughter carrying on the evening air. The ranch was thriving, the store successful, their family healthy and happy. It was more than Vincent had ever thought to ask for. "Do you remember what you told me the night we got married?" Rebecca asked, after everything with Sutton. "I said a lot of things that night. You said you would always fight for us, for our love." She turned to face him fully. "You kept that promise, Vincent. Every single day for 25 years you kept it." "It was the easiest promise I ever made." Vincent cupped her scarred cheek tenderly. "Loving you, choosing you, fighting for our life together. That was never hard, that was just right." Rebecca kissed him then, sweet and familiar, a kiss they had shared thousands of times, but that still made Vincent's heart skip. When they pulled apart, she was smiling. "Come on, husband. Our family is waiting. Lead the way, wife." They walked back to the party hand in hand, two people who had been rejected by the world but had found perfect acceptance in each other. Vincent looked at the life they had built and felt nothing but gratitude. He had spent 3 years believing that love was weakness, that isolation was safety, that a man with nothing had nothing to offer. Rebecca had taught him the truth. That love was the greatest strength, that connection was what made survival worthwhile, and that a man with nothing but a good heart and willing hands had everything that mattered. As the Montana stars emerged overhead and music filled the night air, Vincent Zachariah held his wife close and knew he was exactly where he was meant to be, living exactly the life he was meant to live. It had taken courage to open his heart, faith to believe in their love, and determination to build something lasting. But it had been worth every moment of risk, every second of fear, every challenge they had faced. Because in the end, they had not just survived the harsh frontier, they had thrived together, creating a legacy of love that would outlast them both, and that was the greatest victory of all.